Captain Jackson squinted at the sensor readings, his weathered face etched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The Stardust Drifter, a small survey vessel under his command, was drifting near the cartographer's edge, a region of space known for its unpredictable anomalies and forgotten secrets. For weeks, their scanners had been picking up faint energy signatures, whispers in the void that hinted at something unusual lurking beyond the veil of known space. Most captains would have dismissed them as cosmic noise, but Jackson had a hunch, a gut feeling honed by years of navigating the treacherous currents of the galaxy. "Anything concrete, Leaf?" Jackson asked, turning to his chief science officer. Leaf, a young, eager xenoarchaeologist with a perpetually disheveled appearance, adjusted his glasses and tapped a few keys on his console. "Captain, the energy fluctuations are definitely artificial. They seem to be emanating from a single point approximately 3 light hours from our current position. I'm detecting traces of unusual alloys. Nothing in our database matches the composition." Jackson stroked his chin, his eyes narrowing in thought. An unknown vessel, drifting in uncharted territory. It could be a derelict, a remnant of a long-lost civilization, or something far more dangerous. The cartographer's edge was littered with the wreckage of ambitious expeditions and ill-fated encounters. "Lay in a course, Leaf. Proceed with caution," Jackson ordered. "I want full spectrum scans at all times. Shields up, weapons hot." The Stardust Drifter shuddered slightly as its engines engaged, pushing the small vessel forward into the unknown. The journey was slow and tense, the crew hyper-aware of every flicker on the radar, every creak of the hull. Jackson spent most of his time on the bridge, monitoring the sensor readings and reviewing the ship's security protocols. He was a pragmatic man, not prone to flights of fancy, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to stumble upon something extraordinary. As they approached the designated coordinates, the Stardust Drifter scanners painted a clearer picture of the object emitting the energy signature. It was a ship, or what was left of one. Its hull was fractured and scarred, its once sleek lines twisted into grotesque angles. Sections of the vessel were missing entirely, exposing a tangled web of wires and conduits to the cold vacuum of space. "Report," Jackson barked, his voice tight with anticipation. "It's definitely alien, Captain," Leaf replied, his voice tinged with excitement. "The design is unlike anything I've ever seen. It appears to be organic in nature, almost like it was grown rather than built." Jackson stared at the image on the main view screen, his mind struggling to comprehend the alien architecture. The ship's hull was covered in strange patterns and symbols, like the intricate carvings on an ancient temple. There were no visible weapons, no obvious signs of propulsion. It was as if the ship had simply been abandoned, left to drift aimlessly through the cosmos. "Can we determine its origin?" Jackson asked. "Negative, Captain. The ship's systems are offline. I'm detecting residual energy signatures, but they're too faint to trace. It's been adrift for a long time." Jackson weighed his options. The ship could be a treasure trove of knowledge, a window into a lost civilization, but it could also be a trap, a silent tomb filled with unknown dangers. The risks were significant, but the potential rewards were too tempting to ignore. "Prepare a boarding party," Jackson announced. "I'm going in." A ripple of apprehension spread through the bridge crew. Boarding a derelict alien ship was never a safe proposition, but no one dared to question Jackson's decision. He was a respected leader, known for his courage and his ability to make tough calls under pressure. Jackson assembled a small team, consisting of Leaf, the ship's security officer, a burly ex-military man named Garin, and the chief engineer, a wiry and resourceful woman named Mara. They donned their environment suits, armed themselves with pulse rifles and diagnostic scanners, and gathered at the airlock. "Remember the protocols," Jackson said, his voice firm. "Stay close, scan everything, and report any anomalies. We don't know what we're walking into." The airlock hissed open, and the boarding party stepped out into the void. They activated their magnetic boots and cautiously made their way across the hull of the Stardust Drifter towards the alien ship. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hiss of their respirators and the crackle of their comms. As they approached the derelict, Jackson felt a growing sense of unease. The ship exuded an aura of decay and despair, a palpable sense of loss and abandonment. It was as if the very structure was mourning its fate. They located a breach in the hull, a gaping hole that led into the ship's interior. Jackson signaled his team to follow, and they cautiously entered the alien vessel. The interior was dark and cavernous, filled with strange shadows and alien machinery. The air was thick with the smell of decay and an unfamiliar metallic tang. The walls were covered in the same intricate carvings as the exterior hull, patterns that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light of their helmet lamps. "Sensors are picking up something," Leaf said, his voice trembling slightly. "There's a source of intense energy deep within the ship." Jackson raised his pulse rifle and led his team deeper into the derelict. They navigated through a maze of corridors and chambers, their senses on high alert. The alien architecture was disorienting, defying all known principles of engineering. It was as if the ship had been designed by a mind utterly alien to human comprehension. Finally, they reached their destination, a large, circular chamber at the heart of the ship. In the center of the chamber, resting on a pedestal of polished obsidian, was a shard of the same material. It pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, radiating a palpable energy that made the air crackle. "What is that thing?" Garen whispered, his eyes wide with awe and trepidation. "I don't know," Jackson replied, his voice barely audible. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." Navigator Anya Petrova had always prided herself on her mental fortitude. Years spent charting courses through the vast emptiness of space had honed her mind into a sharp, precise instrument. She could calculate complex trajectories in her head, navigate by the faintest stellar whispers, and maintain unwavering focus even under the most stressful conditions. But ever since the Stardust Drifter had stumbled upon the derelict alien ship and recovered the obsidian shard, Anya's mind had begun to unravel. It started subtly, a fleeting sense of unease, a nagging feeling that she was being watched. Then came the headaches, throbbing pains that radiated from her temples and blurred her vision. She dismissed them as the result of prolonged exposure to the ship's artificial gravity and recycled air. But the headaches grew more intense, accompanied by vivid nightmares that left her gasping for breath in the middle of the night. In her dreams, Anya saw vast, subterranean cities built of chitin and bone. Swarms of insectoid creatures with glistening carapaces and multifaceted eyes scuttled through the tunnels, their mandibles clicking and chattering in a language she couldn't understand. She felt their presence, a cold, alien intelligence that permeated every corner of her being. They called themselves the Hive. At first, she thought they were just nightmares, the product of a stressed mind and an overactive imagination. But the dreams became more frequent, more vivid, more real. She could feel the weight of the Hive's collective consciousness pressing down on her, probing her thoughts, stealing her memories. She felt like a puppet, her strings controlled by an unseen puppeteer. During her waking hours, Anya found herself increasingly distracted, unable to concentrate on her duties. She would stare blankly at the navigation charts, her mind filled with images of the Hive cities. The ship's comforting hum and the familiar routines of space travel seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the incessant chattering of the alien insects. She tried to confide in her crewmates, but her words came out garbled and incoherent. She spoke of insectoid aliens, subterranean cities, and a looming invasion. They looked at her with concern, attributing her ramblings to the stresses of deep space exploration. "Anya, you need to rest," Captain Jackson said, his voice filled with concern. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. Take a few days off, get some sleep. We can manage without you for a while." Anya knew that Jackson meant well, but she couldn't rest. The Hive was growing stronger, its influence spreading like a virus through her mind. She felt an urgent need to warn her crewmates, to convince them of the impending danger. But she couldn't articulate her fears, couldn't find the words to describe the horror that was consuming her. One evening, while on duty in the navigation room, Anya experienced a particularly intense episode. The headaches returned with a vengeance, blurring her vision and twisting her thoughts. She stumbled to her console, clutching her head in agony. The navigation chart swam before her eyes, replaced by images of the hive cities. Then she heard it, a voice, deep and resonant, echoing in her mind. "We are the hive," the voice said. "We are coming." Anya screamed, a primal cry of terror that ripped through the silence of the navigation room. Her crewmates rushed to her side, their faces etched with concern. "Anya, what's wrong?" Leaf asked, his voice filled with alarm. Anya tried to speak, but her words were lost in a torrent of hallucinations. She saw insectoid figures swarming around her, their mandibles snapping and clicking. She felt their cold, alien presence invading her mind. "They're coming," she gasped, her voice barely audible. "The hive is coming." Her crewmates exchanged worried glances. They knew that Anya was suffering from some kind of mental breakdown, but they didn't understand the nature of her affliction. They tried to reassure her, to calm her down, but their words were meaningless. As Anya's mental state deteriorated, the crew of the Stardust Drifter began to experience strange events. Systems malfunctioned, lights flickered, and unsettling noises echoed through the ship. They dismissed them as technical glitches, but Anya knew better. The hive was reaching out, testing their defenses, preparing for the invasion. One night, while Anya was confined to her quarters under medical observation, she had a terrifying dream. She found herself standing in the middle of a vast, subterranean chamber. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, depicting scenes of the hive's history and culture. In the center of the chamber, she saw a massive, pulsating heart, connected to the walls by a network of veins and arteries. The heart was the source of the hive's power, the center of its collective consciousness. Anya felt drawn to it, compelled to touch it, to merge with the hive. But she knew that if she did, she would lose herself completely, becoming just another drone in the hive's vast army. With a surge of willpower, Anya broke free from the hive's influence. She turned and fled from the chamber, running through the twisting tunnels of the subterranean city. She could hear the clicking and chattering of the insectoid creatures behind her, their pursuit growing ever closer. Just as she was about to be overtaken, Anya woke up, gasping for breath. She sat up in her bed, her body trembling with fear. She knew that the dream was a warning, a sign that the hive was about to make its move. Desperate, Anya decided to take matters into her own hands. She slipped out of her quarters and made her way to the ship's armory. She armed herself with a pulse rifle and a handful of grenades, determined to defend her crewmates from the impending invasion. As she crept through the corridors, she heard a faint noise coming from the cargo hold. She cautiously approached the door and peered inside. What she saw sent a chill down her spine. Leaf, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, was standing in front of the obsidian shard, his eyes glazed over, his body swaying gently. He was speaking in a low guttural voice, a language that Anya didn't understand. "The hive welcomes you," Leaf said, his voice barely audible. "Join us, and become one with the collective." Anya raised her pulse rifle, her finger trembling on the trigger. She knew that Leaf was no longer himself. He had been infected by the hive, transformed into a puppet of the alien collective. With a heavy heart, Anya pulled the trigger. The pulse rifle roared, sending a stream of energy bolts searing through the cargo hold. Leaf's body convulsed, then collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Anya stood there for a moment, her body shaking with grief and exhaustion. She had killed her friend, her colleague, her shipmate, but she knew that she had no choice. The hive had to be stopped before it consumed them all. General Torin Valerius surveyed the holographic map of the Ethel system, his eyes scanning the crimson lines that represented the advancing hive forces. The Terran Alliance's outer defenses had crumbled, and the enemy was now poised to strike at the heart of human-controlled space. Ethel, a strategically vital system boasting multiple shipyards and resource-rich planets, was the next logical target. Torin was an unconventional choice for the position of Supreme Commander of the Ethel Defense Force. His strategies were unorthodox, his methods often questioned, and his reputation was a mix of brilliance and recklessness. He was known for his ability to think outside the box, to anticipate his enemies' moves, and to exploit their weaknesses. But he was also known for his disregard for protocol, his insubordination, and his tendency to take risks that often bordered on suicidal. Despite his checkered past, Torin was the only one the Alliance Council believed had a chance of stopping the Hive. The traditional military doctrines had failed. The standardized tactics had proven ineffective. The Hive adapted too quickly, learned too easily. They were like a swarm of insects, overwhelming their opponents with sheer numbers and relentless aggression. "The situation is grim, General," Admiral Race, the commander of the Ethel System Fleet, said, his voice tight with anxiety. "The Hive's vanguard fleet is estimated at over 500 vessels. We have barely 200. Torin nodded, unfazed by the overwhelming odds. "Numbers are just numbers, Admiral. They mean nothing without strategy." He tapped a few keys on his console, highlighting a cluster of asteroids on the map. "We're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to use their numbers against them. We'll lure them into the Ethel asteroid belt and turn it into a killing field." Rice frowned, skeptical of the plan. "The asteroid belt? That's a death trap, General. Our ships will be sitting ducks. Not if we know how to navigate it," Torin countered. "We'll use stealth technology, EMP mines, and remote-controlled drones to harass the Hive fleet and disrupt their formations. We'll hit them hard and fast, then disappear back into the asteroids." The Alliance Council, a collection of politicians and military bureaucrats, was vehemently opposed to Torin's plan. They argued that it was too risky, too unconventional, and too likely to result in heavy casualties. They wanted a traditional fleet engagement, a show of force that would demonstrate the Alliance's resolve. "With all due respect, councilors," Torin said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "your traditional tactics have already failed. We need to be proactive, unpredictable, and ruthless. We need to fight fire with fire." Despite their reservations, the Council reluctantly approved Torin's plan. They knew that they had no other choice. The fate of the Ethel system, and perhaps the entire Alliance, rested on his shoulders. Torin wasted no time in implementing his strategy. He divided his fleet into small, agile squadrons, each tasked with specific objectives. He deployed EMP mines throughout the asteroid belt, creating a network of invisible traps. He launched thousands of remote-controlled drones, armed with plasma cannons and cloaking devices, to harass the Hive fleet. As the Hive vanguard entered the Ethel system, they were met with a wall of resistance unlike anything they had encountered before. Stealth ships emerged from the asteroids, firing precise bursts of energy that crippled their engines and sensors. EMP mines detonated, disabling entire squadrons and throwing their formations into chaos. Drones swarmed around them, harassing them with relentless attacks. The Hive fleet, accustomed to overwhelming their opponents with sheer numbers, was caught off guard by Torin's tactics. They struggled to adapt, their rigid formations proving to be a liability in the chaotic environment of the asteroid belt. Admiral Race, initially skeptical of Torin's plan, was amazed by its effectiveness. His ships, once outgunned and outnumbered, were now wreaking havoc on the Hive fleet. "General, our kill ratio is off the charts," Race exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. "We're inflicting heavy casualties with minimal losses." "Don't get cocky, Admiral," Torin cautioned. "This is just the beginning. The Hive will adapt eventually. We need to stay one step ahead of them." As Torin predicted, the Hive soon began to adjust their tactics. They deployed their own drones to counter the alliances, and they began to use their superior numbers to overwhelm individual squadrons. The fighting grew more intense, the asteroid belt becoming a swirling vortex of fire and destruction. Torin knew that he couldn't sustain the current level of engagement for long. The Alliance fleet was taking heavy damage, and their resources were dwindling. He needed to find a way to break the stalemate, to deliver a decisive blow that would cripple the Hive fleet. He studied the sensor readings, searching for a weakness, an opportunity. Then he saw it, a small gap in the Hive's formation, a vulnerable point that could be exploited. "Admiral, prepare a strike force," Torin ordered. "We're going to hit them where it hurts." Torin personally led the strike force, piloting his flagship, the Dauntless, through the treacherous asteroid field. They navigated through the maze of rocks and debris, dodging enemy fire and avoiding detection. They reached the designated coordinates, and Torin gave the order to attack. The Dauntless and its escorts unleashed a barrage of plasma cannons and torpedoes, targeting the Hive's command ship, a massive vessel that served as the nerve center of their fleet. The Hive command ship was heavily shielded, but Torin's ships were able to penetrate its defenses with a concentrated attack. The ship sustained heavy damage, its systems failing, its engines sputtering. With the Hive command ship crippled, their fleet began to fall apart. Their formations dissolved, their attacks became disorganized, and their morale plummeted. The Alliance fleet seized the opportunity, pressing their attack and driving the Hive forces back into the outer reaches of the Ethel system. Torin had achieved the impossible. He had defended Ethel against overwhelming odds, inflicting heavy casualties on the Hive and buying the Alliance valuable time to prepare their defenses. He had become a hero, a symbol of hope in a galaxy teetering on the brink of destruction. But Torin knew that the war was far from over. The Hive would return, stronger and more determined than ever. And next time, they wouldn't be so easily defeated. Ambassador Lyra Kale stared out at the swirling nebula, a canvas of cosmic dust and starlight, her face reflecting a quiet determination. The war between the Terran Alliance and the Hive raged across multiple star systems, a seemingly endless cycle of violence and destruction. But Lyra refused to accept defeat. She believed that somewhere, buried beneath layers of fear and misunderstanding, lay the seeds of harmony. Lyra was a skilled diplomat, known for her empathy, her patience, and her ability to find common ground even in the most hostile environments. She had brokered peace treaties between warring factions, negotiated trade agreements that benefited all parties involved, and resolved countless disputes through diplomacy and understanding. She was a firm believer in the power of communication, the ability to bridge divides and foster cooperation. But the war with the Hive was unlike anything she had ever faced. The aliens were so fundamentally different from humans, their motivations so alien, their methods so brutal. Many believed that peace was impossible, that the only way to survive was to exterminate the Hive completely. Lyra disagreed. She believed that the Hive's aggression stemmed from fear, from a misunderstanding of human intentions. She had studied their culture, their biology, their history, and she had found evidence of a complex, sophisticated civilization that valued knowledge, cooperation, and harmony. "They're not mindless monsters," she argued before the Alliance Council. "They're a collective intelligence, a society built on shared knowledge and mutual support. They're reacting to us as a threat because they don't understand us. We need to reach out to them, to show them that we're not their enemy." The Council was skeptical, but Lyra's passion and conviction were undeniable. They reluctantly agreed to support her mission, granting her a small unarmed vessel and a team of linguists, scientists, and diplomats. Her mission: to venture into the heart of Hive territory and attempt to establish communication with the alien collective. The journey was fraught with peril. Lyra's ship, the Hopebringer, had to navigate through heavily guarded Hive systems, avoiding patrols and dodging sensor nets. They encountered damaged ships, remnants of fierce battles, and the chilling silence of worlds conquered by the Hive. As they approached the hive's central nexus, a massive interconnected network of subterranean cities spanning multiple planets, Lyra felt a growing sense of unease. The sheer scale of the hive's civilization was overwhelming, its alien architecture both beautiful and terrifying. She initiated a communication beacon, broadcasting a message of peace and goodwill in a variety of languages, including a rudimentary translation of the hive's own complex communication system. The response was immediate and chilling. A swarm of hive fighters descended upon the Hopebringer, their weapons armed and ready to fire. Lyra ordered her crew to stand down, refusing to retaliate. She knew that any act of aggression would doom her mission. The hive fighters surrounded the Hopebringer, their energy weapons trained on its hull. Then, a single vessel detached from the swarm and approached Lyra's ship. It was a heavily armored transport, its hull adorned with intricate patterns and symbols. The transport docked with the Hopebringer, and a group of hive representatives boarded Lyra's ship. They were insectoid creatures, their bodies covered in chitinous armor, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with intelligence. Lyra greeted them with a respectful bow, offering them a gesture of peace. The hive representatives responded with silence, their gaze fixed on Lyra. One of the hive representatives, a towering figure with elaborate mandibles, stepped forward. It emitted a series of clicks and chirps, its voice translated into human language by Lyra's advanced translation matrix. "You have entered hive territory without authorization," the hive representative said. "State your purpose." Lyra took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice filled with sincerity and compassion. She explained her mission, her belief in the possibility of peace, her understanding of the hive's culture and history. She spoke of the shared challenges facing both humans and the hive, the threats posed by other, more aggressive alien civilizations, the potential for cooperation and mutual benefit. The hive representatives listened in silence, their expressions unreadable. Lyra continued to speak, pouring her heart and soul into her message. She knew that the fate of her people, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on her words. Finally, after hours of intense negotiation, the hive representatives responded. "Your words are intriguing," the hive representative said. "We will consider your proposal. But know this, we will not tolerate any deception or aggression. If you betray our trust, we will crush you." Lyra nodded, relieved and hopeful. She had taken the first step, planted the first seed of harmony, but she knew that the journey ahead would be long and difficult. Over the next few weeks, Lyra and her team engaged in a series of intense negotiations with the hive. They shared knowledge, exchanged cultural artifacts, and explored areas of common ground. They discovered that the hive, like humans, had faced periods of conflict and division in their history. They had also experienced the threat of extinction, forcing them to evolve and adapt. Lyra learned that the hive's aggression towards humans stemmed from a deep-seated fear of the unknown. They had encountered other alien civilizations that had sought to exploit them, to enslave them, to destroy them. They saw humans as just another threat, a potential enemy to be eliminated. Lyra convinced them that humans were different, that they valued freedom, diversity, and cooperation. She showed them examples of human kindness, compassion, and selflessness. She demonstrated that humans were capable of empathy, of understanding perspectives different from their own. Slowly, gradually, the hive began to trust Lyra and her team. They saw that humans were not their enemy, but rather potential allies. Then Lyra revealed the truth about the obsidian shard. She explained its origins, its connection to an ancient, powerful civilization that had once threatened the entire galaxy. She warned the hive that this civilization might still exist, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The hive was shocked by this revelation. They had sensed the presence of the obsidian shard, but they had not understood its true significance. They realized that humans were not just offering peace, but also a warning, a call for cooperation against a greater threat. Together, humans and the hive forged an alliance, vowing to defend each other against any external threat. They shared their knowledge, their technology, and their resources. They learned to understand each other, to respect each other, to trust each other. The war between humans and the hive had ended, replaced by a fragile but enduring peace. Ambassador Lyra Kale had achieved the impossible, planting the seeds of harmony in a galaxy torn apart by conflict. But Lyra knew that the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The ancient civilization hinted at by the obsidian shard remained a threat, a dark cloud hanging over the galaxy. The alliance between humans and the hive would be tested, their resolve challenged, their unity threatened. Lyra stared out at the swirling nebula, her face filled with hope and determination. She knew that the future was uncertain, but she also knew that together, humans and the hive could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and create a brighter future for all.